Okay, I think we're live. I will share, I'm going to share it quickly onto Heart of the Matter. So if everyone can just hold on, and maybe while people are jumping on, I'll go and share it. And you can share it to your page if you'd like. So just give us about 30 seconds here. And yes, we are live. Okay, that's good. And we're talking today about education, specifically, well, a lot of things, but homeschooling will be probably one of the things that comes up.
Homeschooling, COVID schooling, different things.
Exactly. Okay, so I think we're on now. Oops. Okay, let me close those out. I'm getting two. Okay, cool. Welcome, Janet. Thank you so much for this impromptu. I think I reached out to you like a day or two ago, and of course, in the way we roll, it was like, all right, let's do this. No time like the moment, like this present moment. So I'd love to just give Janet a moment to tell a little bit about herself, and then I'm going to share how we met and kind of what we want the flow of the conversation to be today.
Sweet. Yes. Okay. So mom of 7, living in Las Vegas. I'm originally from Utah. I got married pretty young, had kids pretty young. Loved the school system. I was always, the school system was good for me. I was a good student. And I loved, the social bit of it. Yeah. So a lot of people that know me are really surprised that I homeschool because I was, just had nothing to complain about. But I went through college pretty easily and had 2 babies in the middle of like my semesters. And sitting through my college graduation, I kind of had like a lightning bolt moment of realizing that I'd been through, 15 years of education. And I remember sitting in that chair with a cap and gown and trying to remember like how many books have changed me. What have I learned, and I looked back at my husband who was holding our 2 little kids, and it was like, I don't want to give them the same experience. Even though I loved my experience, I wonder if I could do something different. And it was really life-changing. And so, yeah, I started homeschooling them when they were like 2 and 3 years old. And I thought at first it was just like experimenting before, kindergarten started.
Yeah. How long ago was that?
2004.
Okay. So 16 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So you had kids when you were like 5, because you're so young, there's no way.
I just turned 40. So,
Okay.
yeah. It was just kind of one of those. And once I had that decision that I wanted to homeschool, I just started checking out as many books as I could at the library or reading all kinds of resources. And I didn't sleep for like 2 weeks because I was so excited about the possibility of like what school could look like for my own kids.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I just read hundreds of books while they were little and just experimented. I got to know my 2 oldest are very different. Their personalities, they learn very differently, but that was really fun. They were both reading by about 3 years old. Like fluently, like reading chapter books, which none of my other kids have. And I don't know if that was my passion at the time or if it was just that they were good little students. But, over the years, I've had more kids. So I have 7. My oldest is 19 and my youngest is 3 years old. So we have a span. They're not one of them is the same. They all have different learning types.
Oh, yeah.
They all have different talents. And, through the years, we have put them in school, depending on where we live, depending on, the situation, just because my husband's not a huge avid homeschooling fan. So I think that adds to the dynamic of, and, if I wasn't like so super passionate about it, then I probably would give in to like society and everything else. But anyway, so I have one high school graduate and going to college in the fall, my oldest, and then a senior this next year, and he's enrolled in school. And then I have going into high school, 14-year-old, he's enrolled in high school as well.
Okay.
And then I homeschool the rest. So anyway, it kind of depends on the year, but.
Okay, so this is what was so cool. So Janet and I met through, I went to Dr. Shefali's conference and I posted on the like Facebook group before we got there, like, hey, I'm really interested in education reform. And then we talked a bunch at the conference. And then we got to know each other through Marco Polo, which is like a conversational, it's like text messaging through video. And as I listened to your messages for like a month during COVID, when we were in quarantine, I was like, thank goodness for Janet, because I have someone to talk to in this crazy COVID quarantine. No, but during that time, I was like, wow, we share such a similar philosophy on children and learning. And what's so fascinating is the last 20 years, so my story of like the public education system really failing me, and then me having to do community college and being the first, generation college student and graduating from Berkeley and Stanford, which sounds so impressive, but like the journey to get there was quite, tumultuous. And then I get into the education system about 2003, and really 2000 when I was working as a tutor and stuff. So I've spent the last 20 years thinking about how we can reform the system. You've spent the last 20 years thinking about how we can reform the system. I've done it like as an educator in the traditional schools, in charter schools. You've done it with your kids. And what I love about Janet is that she has 7 kids. So it's like when she was giving me the Marco Polos, it's like, oh, she sounds like a teacher. She's like, well, this one really needs this, and this one really, and when you have 7 kids, it's like a small classroom, right? So, and they all have different needs. So I'm like, oh, she gets it. Like, you really are a teacher. I'm not surprised you're passionate about homeschooling. You've been doing it forever, right? You're a teacher.
But guess what?
Beautiful.
Actually, every parent is a teacher.
Every parent is. Thank you.
Every parent.
Thank
so you. When
so
parents
clear.
reach out to me and ask questions, it's like, well, tell me about your child. Of course, they know everything. They know what their likes and distarts. They know what, they respond to. So every parent is the ideal teacher for their child. It's just really kind of working past the control or the boredom or figuring out the communication, I think is key. But
and okay, on that note, I was interacting with Sherry on Heart of the Matter, my Facebook group last night, about what she was going to do with her daughter who's going into 7th grade in Southern California. And I asked her to share what the vision is she had for her daughter's schooling experience, her daughter's experience. I took the word school out. And she was typing and she said she wasn't really sure. By the end of her message on the wall, she was like, no, I do know. She should be with animals, she should be with friends, she should be creative. And so this moment is actually really difficult. We can acknowledge that. For people like you, you're like, I'm still homeschooling. It is difficult, but not really. But for a lot of people, they're like, oh my gosh, we've been with them for 4 or 5 months. Like, what are we going to do in 2 weeks? People are like really in fear, which I know you have opinions. I know you're going to have some great thoughts about that. But what ended up happening with Sherry was she kind of was able to go through the process and find a tutor and do an independent study charter school. Like, she was able to what I encourage her to do is don't get out of fear, get out of the small self and get into this real expansive, highest version of yourself. Your child so deeply. Now create that experience for them in the moment like you can in this right now. And so she's going to do independent study charter school. She has a tutor that's an animal lover that's going to, I believe, bring dogs over, and so they're going to get the animal interactions. She's going to, I think, co-quarantine with a few other families, so there's social interaction. Her husband was really concerned about getting the more traditional academic, so they're going to get that through the independent study charter school. So I share this story because I feel like she was really, I believe she was scared a couple of days ago, and it all kind of unfolded really beautifully. But I think that's where a lot of people are right now.
Right. Just wondering what to do. And I think the uncertainty of it is a little bit I think the schools are kind of still in the air about what they're doing. Our schools are kind of like, is it 2 days a week? Is it half day? Is it all online? So I think the uncertainty of all of this whole situation is the problem,
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's normal. I also think, it's not really true that that things haven't I think I'm realizing what the effect that it's had on my home, even though that we're homeschoolers too. I just realized, we're homeschoolers. My husband actually still goes into his office. He's alone. He goes, and so life hasn't really changed for us, but we went camping 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And I watched my introverted senior son come alive while camping and hiking.
Mm-hmm.
And I just realized I thought, oh, maybe online school would be good for him. He can finish his senior year. But then I came home from that and I'm like, what other options can I do for him? Is there like
Yeah.
an adventure school? Is there
Yes.
something, because I didn't realize, and I'm not saying he has been depressed, but I just thought, he's just been normal and life is normal, but I just saw a change in him become alive. And I thought, that's my son that I've been missing for the past 4 or 5 months. There he is. And he's not going to look for school options for himself. He thinks it's just normal and you do what you do. But, I was spent all night researching like what other options could I do for him. Maybe he should take his GED and then go on some kind of adventure somewhere. But what's open?
Well, I know when I saw you post about that, I was like, keep the ideas coming, because I knew we'd be talking. And I think it's a really great point, is that what I love about you is that you will really be in that kind of creative, innovative space. So you're like, and then you want to think about, with all 7 children, like what are each individual child's needs? And then you ask yourself that question. And what I think one of the reasons I wanted to bring you on is because you don't get stuck in the kind of like old paradigm or the old way of thinking or the kind of like fear-based thinking, but more like, oh, what are the opportunities? Like you're a total ideas person. You're like, okay, let me go research and see. And you've had your kids in charter schools, you've had your kids homeschooled, you've had your kids in the normal public school.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So the public charters, the public schools, the homeschool. So you've kind of seen it from a lot of different angles. And I think that's, again, like what people right now, we've been asking, a lot of us, you and me, have been asking for this reform for like 20 years. And now it's basically hit us over the head and been like, okay, you wanted it. But yet a lot of us are nervous about putting our kids back, not being able to put our kids back into school, which of course, because we're stressed and we're home with them. But like, I want to invite people to actually see this as a massive opportunity. And I wanted you to share like, what kind of things can people be thinking about when they're thinking about their one child or their 3 children or their different ages? Like what would you recommend to them as somebody who's done all these different ways of schooling, and like, what's our opportunity here?
Well, I mean, I think going back to like Dr. Shefali and how we met and this whole, this last year I've gotten trained as a conscious parenting coach, which is really exactly like what and honestly now I'm basically a homeschooling coach of like, how can we help these parents develop? And it's not really homeschooling, because not all parents are going to be great at homeschooling. I mean, what I was really excited for is these parents who wanted to try homeschooling and they never had the guts to do it. And now, you see all these people coming out of the woodworks of like, wow, we have a lot more time on our hands. Our mornings aren't so rushed. My child is less stressed. But not every parent is up for it or can. I mean,
wants to go all in.
Or can, they're working or they, and so I do think just trying to think outside the box of like, what are my best options? If it really is only A and B, like the child goes 2 days a week or they stay home online, I still think there's options. So it's really just thinking outside the box and like trying to figure out, what can I do for my child? How can I help them develop their own talents and not feel like they're forced to sit on a computer and listen to whatever that they're not interested in, And so, and honestly, the computer, nothing's wrong with the computer. It just needs to be a subject that the child can get involved in, So I'm not anti, like, I mean, there's so much on YouTube that my kids do learn. I just want to make sure that it's like, is this helping you develop, your own strengths and talents so that you can go out into the world and be that person who you were supposed to be, not the robot that I felt like I was when I graduated school, And so it really is like making a list of like all the things that your child loves, making a list of like, how can you and your child connect together? Maybe there is opportunity to cook in the kitchen with the child, and that just means bringing them in for dinner time and like, having this, realizing that school is so much more than filling out math. Or just even any kind of homework pages. Some students, some of my children do really well with homework pages and they're just begging for more. I would say that most of my kids, those are the ones that are not very creative to do play on their own or to think on their own.
They want to kind of just follow the rules.
They're good students and that's okay. for some of my kids, for my oldest, actually, he was such a good rule follower that I always said, like, I'm homeschooling you so you can do whatever you want. And he would keep asking me, like, what should I do next? I'm like, what do you want to do next? You know? And I don't know if that's helped him at 19, but I'm still asking him, you know, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Yeah.
You like, go that way. And then if you don't like it after a year or two, like make the change, like it's totally fine. So I think the fear that parents have is really around, are they going to be a successful adult? Like, am I going to fail them and they're never going to get a job and they're never going to, you know, I think that's where the fear is. It's a lot of projection into the future.
Yes.
And it's less of, can I handle, you know, these few months of homeschooling them? Can I get through today of like, you know, I think that's kind of where the coaching comes back, is like, we need to stop projecting into the future.
Yes.
Some of our children would do really well in school, and then they would be successful in their job and actually be miserable because they haven't figured out who they are yet. And so, you know, I mean, they could have a midlife crisis at 40 and change their career. And that has nothing to do with education. And so I do feel like homeschooling, at least my opinion of it, is that it allows your child a little bit of freedom to get to know themselves and their own interests and their own talents. And it kind of forces them to be a little bit more creative. And I don't know. I mean, those are some of the strengths.
It's great. And we actually have a couple babysitters that come over and they've been homeschooled, and our kids love them because they just play they're so creative. They're always playing a game. Whereas when we get like kind of a normal teenager to come over, I'm not kidding you, a couple of them are just like on their phone the whole time. Like, we're kind of paying you here. Like, I know I do that too, but I'm not getting paid. So like, you should probably pay attention to the kids. But I think the interesting piece is that what you taught me when the kids, okay, first of all, there were like billions of kids and parents had no choice in like March, April, May, and depending on which country you're in, where you are, like we all just all of a sudden became the worst version of homeschooling because you didn't get to have the social groups and it was just crazy, right? But what you taught me is you said, so let's talk about the philosophy that we agree on, which is learning happens at all times, all over the place. It's not 8 to 3. It's not the factory model construct that we all went to school in. Happens all the time. So you're like, get them to cook with you, get them to play the piano, ask them to read. That's the number one thing that you helped us with. It's like, just read to your kids. It's like, oh my gosh. So my daughter, I haven't given this update. She's turning 7 in like 2 weeks, and she hasn't been doing any of the schoolwork since May. And we kind of stopped it like a month early. And she's picked up a book and started reading yesterday. And I was thinking of you because you're like, just read to them. Just read to them. So I'm still working, but my wife's, took some time off, and she's been reading to them every day. And now as a family, we read books, we read to my son, my son's reading. And so there's so many like little things that you can do. But more than anything, I think what you're getting at is like, learning happens all the time. So we need a social paradigm shift, which is that you have to put your kids in a school from 8 to 3. They have to do X, Y, and Z, standardized curriculum and all that, and in order to get the good job. And that's our opportunity right now to be like, what if we just connect with our kids and rethink school? Like, just totally rethink it. Like, what if we just believe that if they are hanging out with their family and learning and creating things, and the parents know them better than anyone else in the world? Talk about personalized learning. Like, who else is going to know what your kids need more than you?
Yeah. And I think a lot of times parents think that kids are learning when they're forced to do something, like, oh, they're learning how to do hard things, or they're learning how to sit in a desk or be obedient.
Right.
But I honestly think that learning happens when the child's eyes light up. That's when learning happens. So you can be covering a subject that one child is learning, and it's going to stick with them. There's going to be animal facts, or there's going to be some kind of science project that sticks with the child forever, but another child isn't interested in it. So as a parent, I think it's really about like, what makes my child light up, and how can I get more of that in their life? And they don't need to do it, 24 hours a day, but if they could get an hour in of, and like I said, with hiking, that's not school. Do I think my 17-year-old is learning? No, but he's coming alive. And so maybe he does have a future, in the mountains.
Yeah.
You know, like maybe he does.
But isn't he learning too? I would even push back on that.
Well,
Like,
well, no, I do. That he is,
right?
because he's lighting up. That's what he is.
Right.
So it's recognizing that. So it's really just trying to be more conscious and aware as a parent, and like, okay, this is not good for my child. And so online learning can be good for certain students. I think the
Right.
self-directed, the homework loving, the
And you've done that
really
with one of your kids,
obedient.
right?
Yeah.
Did it work for one of your kids? Yeah.
He wants to be a computer programmer. So, you know, he's
Yeah.
really enjoying what
Yeah.
he's learning.
Yeah.
And he's doing a specific class for that. So I think that helps, you know, that
Mhm.
so I don't know. It's just, I guess, being aware,
Yeah.
having those conversations with your kids, trying not to feel like you're alone in the decision making, because your kids can help you
Yes.
figure themselves out. And
Yes.
and I think talking to them is great, you know, and really making a list. We, at the beginning of the quarantine, we just made a list of all the things that we could do and put it on our fridge, so that when I'm bored came up, it's just a lack of, okay, well, what do you want to do? What makes you happy? And so I do think that those are all natural skills. But
Yeah.
again, going back to saying that it's not, homeschooling isn't an option for everyone.
Yeah.
So I think
Thank you for saying that. Yeah.
getting back into the New York Times article that you posted yesterday, which we need to link that, because this is what's happening around the country, is that parents are starting to look at other options. And that's what's exciting, is that can we get together as communities, small groups, and figure out what our talents are with our own children, and create an environment for them to learn together? Because social skills, I would say that's the number one like question I get asked as a homeschooler, like, how do you teach them social skills? And I usually say, you know, homeschoolers are kind of weird. I'll just say that they are a little. Like, I'll admit that. But I think they're as weird as their parents, you know? And I actually think that public school kids are as weird as their parents. You get really socially awkward kids in public school.
This is so true.
And so, you know, but I do think that they're maybe a little bit, I don't know, they're maybe not as cool or as hip, or, you know what's going on. And that's totally true with my kids. They don't know what's in fashion at all. They have no idea. And that's okay. But what I think is that the social is important, especially for kids who have been in school and they're now at home. Like they need that interaction. And so I think making an effort to get together with people that you know, and figuring out, like, maybe their kids are online and they need to do that option. But are you doing anything after school? Are you getting together at the park and playing soccer? Are you forming a book club? Like, you could even do that online, you know.
Like a virtual book club.
And like doing things that are outside the box that they never have done before because they were too busy.
That's what happened to us. It's so fascinating what happened to us. And I told you this before. Basically, the first week, so I run the school that the kids attend. So the first week, they literally wanted to follow the schedule to a T. Like, they wanted to write it on the whiteboard and follow the teacher's schedule. And so I was like, oh, this is so interesting. Let me just observe how this all goes. And then after a week, I was like, hey guys, do you want to maybe like tell me what you'd love to do today and not follow the schedule? They're like, no, oh my gosh, no. And I was like, wow, they've already been so conditioned. But then after a couple of weeks, they started getting really into, and then they got a little too crazy. We had to kind of dial it back. But they were just like, oh, let's do this, let's do that. And it's all the things they love to do. So we were like creating things and building things and playing outside and all this really fun stuff. But here's one of the questions I want to ask you related to this, because one of the things that my homeschool friends tell me is that you can actually, in a traditional classroom, and my educator friends have supported this, there's about 1 to 2 hours of actual academic learning time that happens because of all the other kids, like actual academic learning time. There's a lot of beautiful other things that happen, but like the reading, math, and writing is maybe a couple hours a day. So I've been encouraging people, like, okay, so just do distance learning through your school and try and spend a couple hours on that. And then the other 10, 15 hours of the day, what if you're just like as present with your kids as you can be, based on the fact that some of us are working, some of us, how can you use like cooperative and maybe have some shared babysitting and parents and, all within like the social distancing or, responsibly. But like, what do you think about this kind of obsession with the academic piece, and how if we start homeschooling, their kids are not going to do very well academically?
It could be true for some children. It could be true that maybe a child isn't. Hi.
You hit the building. And
yeah, hang on.
else is locked. Everything else is locked.
Okay, thank you. It could be that, but there are a lot of kids in public school who also don't do well in their futures. So I don't necessarily think it's the avenue that the child is in. I think it's the personality. And so I can see why parents fear that, but I also think if you take the fear out of it, then you put a lot less pressure on the child to be making these like really big decisions about their lives. And but this is I said my husband's not a huge homeschooling fan, and so these are topics that we have all the time. We're talking about this, and our oldest got into college easily, and he did a homeschooling program that was online. He had a few, he went to high school for a year. Did those credits transfer? Yes, they did. Did he do well on the ACT? Yes, he did. But some kids don't do well, and honestly, some kids shouldn't go to college. They should probably do some kind of trade or do, I feel like the future of school and colleges is going to be transforming because, so I don't know. Did that answer your question, or what do you mean?
Yeah, no, it did. No, it really did. And I think, I guess what I was trying to, no, it helped. What I was trying to get at is, I think people are worried that if they homeschool, their kids won't learn how to read or be able to do all these academic subjects. So then that's kind of perpetuating the fear that people are in right now of like, oh, we have to be home with our kids now. And do we have to get like a certified teacher, or do we have to, and I guess I wanted people to hear that sometimes learning just happens, and it's not about following the worksheets and following the curriculum. So what I loved about what you said though, is that it does depend on the kid. And, if the kid's coming from a family where the parents aren't educated, or they haven't heard, 8 million, it's like parents that went to college, the kids have heard 8 million more words by the time they're 5, so then they can pick up reading and that kind of stuff. So I know that's part of the case, but I guess I'm just saying that you can find a way to just, I guess, want people to get out of the paradigm of it has to be done in the way that we all went to school and and I just want them to be free to let go of the fear. And there's no, what are you falling behind? Everyone's doing, like, almost every state in this country is basically not going back, as far as I can see. Like, some of them are saying they're thinking about it. I'm like, you're not going back for a while. Like, maybe you could do hybrid, but like, just there's nowhere to be behind. Like, just figure out what your kid needs and just try and be free to actually do it.
And put the bottle back in the member's closet, please.
Okay, thank you. I will. Sorry.
Yeah. No, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, totally. And what I think is that I am excited about the shifts that are happening with education, because when a child learns, maybe kids can figure out what they're excited about in a book at school while a teacher is lecturing. But most of the time, that's not how it is. It's usually some kind of hands-on learning, or a field trip somewhere, or just being exposed to something they hadn't been exposed to before, and then seeing it in a new way. And I think if we can break out of this like paradigm that our kids need to figure out what they're doing with their futures by the time they're 18, then we can, because most of us don't really know what we want to do when we go into college. And so then we're getting out student loans and we're taking classes, and then, we finish college and then we don't know what we want to do with that degree, So I think if we just stop putting pressure on our kids to figure out their own futures and just let them be themselves, then I think they have more of a chance to be themselves, and to just, to develop their strengths, and to, there's some good things in like making a child practice piano when they don't want to practice, pushing that through. But there's certain students who are just going to pick it up, and maybe they could pick it up at 18 years old and really want to play piano. And so then, they want to play piano at 18 or 30, and then they put the work in, and then they, really want to do it. And so I just feel like having faith in your child that they're going to
Yep.
figure it out their own lives.
Yes.
And they might not
Yes.
figure it out until they're 40 or 50, like the rest of us.
Exactly.
And that's okay.
Well, and what you're talking about is that we kind of have this formula that you're supposed to follow. And the formula is, let's be really clear. COVID has basically said your formula is ridiculous because you have like high teenage suicide, high teenage depression, massive anxiety issues, just all these societal, social issues, right? And so this is our moment to say, like, maybe we should just rethink a lot of this. And so, for example, my school building, beautiful community, no judgment on the parents, but and I'm one of them that puts my kid in the aftercare, but we'll have families that have their kids are from 7 a.m. until 6 p.m. every day. And I get it because they're working, but maybe we should reimagine how we're outsourcing our kids because we're creating workplaces where you don't ever see your kid anymore. I mean, there's so many places where it's let's stop thinking about this in a way where it's just follow the formula where everyone's running around like crazy, putting their kids in. But when people ask about my school, they want to know if we have before and after school care. It's the first question they ask. And if we don't have it, they have no interest in enrolling. So it's why don't we try and reimagine the paradigm and think about, all these businesses that aren't opening up anymore, they're going to go virtual or they're going to go, telecommuting. And how do we think about leveraging the community to work together, like that New York Times article?
Yes.
There's so many options. And I think it did talk about the kind of equity issues, which I agree with, but let's talk about communities that could actually organize small groups and pods. And then maybe we create a nonprofit that helps them pay the teacher. And I mean, there's just so many opportunities right now to just totally get out of the box. Like you said, stop thinking about you go to a 4-year college and then, because this is the formula. You go to, for middle class people, especially middle class white people, you go to the college, you get your degree, then you get some sort of job, you do that. And then at some point you turn 40 and you get a sports car or and then you're bored and you're like, what am I doing with my life? And then, like you said, we're acting like we're freaking out because our kids don't know what they're doing but none of us, most of us don't. We pretend like we do. We follow the formula and then we realize that we're not even happy. So what are we doing? What is this all for?
Yeah, but that's why this is so exciting with COVID, is because it's not just, it's not just shutting down the school system. It's bringing everything, it's shaking everything up to where parents can work from home and they can, a job that they thought they needed to be there at 9 to 5, they actually realized maybe they could do it from home. Maybe they could have conference calls and, not spend the time traveling to and from, or, all these things that are happening. So I also think it has to be shaking up that school happens between these 2 hours, because there are kids who are doing it at different hours. Hopefully, parents are like, oh, that doesn't work for my teenager because he doesn't wake up until noon and I don't need to wake him up because he doesn't learn at 8 a.m.
Tons of studies. When I opened my high school, we didn't open until 9 o'clock, which we would have done 10, but the parents wouldn't let us. But there's tons of studies on the adolescent brain and how they're not awake. I mean, there's so many pieces, that whole thing is around the parents' work schedule. So the schedule of the school is set around the parents' work schedule, and the school is set around a factory model where there's bells and 52-minute classes and 3,000 kids in a high school. I mean, there's just so many things that we need to deal with that we have the opportunity.
And the schedule of what needs to happen. I do think there's a lot of pressure around, when they graduate, are they going to get into college? How are they going to test? But it goes all the way down to kindergarten. And honestly, it starts earlier than that. Is my 9-month rolling over when he should? I don't know. So that I feel like that a lot of pressure on a child in first grade and, second grade, and you can get those books and you can read what your second grader needs to know. But I think for the most part, if you trust that they will learn what is important to them because it's important to them, and they will figure it out. And not everyone needs calculus. Not everyone needs to get deep into, I can't remember what I learned in 3rd grade science because I wasn't that interested.
Your kids went through this. So this is not theoretical, kids can learn at any time and just let them be free. No, like this is what you've done for the last 14 years. And did any of your kids fall so far behind that you felt like you had to get them enrolled and like they were, I just wanted people to hear that this didn't happen to you. There were issues.
I think there are moments that, freak a parent out. And I have one son who's highly social and he's not the best student. And so is he reading at age 10 where everyone thinks he should? He's not picking up those, chapter books, but I'm not stressing because I know he has something in him. I haven't figured out yet what he's going to do, so there are moments that I do stress, like, are you going to be living with us until you're 30? I don't know but I don't know if that would change if he was in school. I think that it's his personality. And so, I mean, there's those fears, but I think if I can not put those fears on this child and realize that those are my own like insecurities about my own parenting.
Yes.
Because he's not worried about his future. He never comes to me and says, am I smart? He's not. I'm projecting that onto him. And so,
yes.
And I think that's normal. And I think that, that's just a part of being a good parent, is stressing about your child and hoping that they have a good future.
Yeah.
If you weren't. And so I think thinking about the options are good, but I think when you put that on the child and say, you really need to be doing this so that you can make me feel better about my own parenting, then I think that's where we cross the line. And so I think thinking outside the box and like, how can I help this child figure out their own interests and talk to them about that, have that be part of their conversation. And then if you're not the person to be teaching them piano lessons, or you're not, I think, you don't even need to hire someone. You can just really put it out there of like, oh, I wonder if there's like a group that you could go to, or because finances it's a struggle. I think it's a really big deal for homeschoolers. If they had, so Nevada almost passed a homeschooling stipend in 2016. And, no one was a fan of it because they don't want homeschoolers spending, public school money and doing whatever they want with it. But I think it would have been a really great experience to like, because you just still had to track it and like show your receipts. Yeah. But I just feel like I'm wondering what's going to happen with the country, and if that's even a possibility to start some kind of pod school or to hire a coach and bring, have a PE day or an art teacher or something else. But there's high school students who want to be a tutor, that could get paid minimally.
Leverage
and
the community.
you get
or
10,
do like
10
trades
kids
and stuff.
Oh,
You can do trades, and you don't have to, if it's there's not a lot of resources in a community, they can find other ways to
and you
work
don't
together.
you don't have to have something exciting every single day. If you had PE on Fridays and your child knew you were going to go to a park and you were going to meet 5 or 6 kids on Friday, and you had a cooking class, or you even said, Tuesdays, we're going to make something. Let's make a list of the ingredients. Let's go shopping for them. Let's plan a budget. Let's cook it in the kitchen. Let's invite a friend over. I mean, those are all meeting social distancing, and that's learning, and have it be the child's absolute favorite meal. And then, I think that there's a lot of things that you can do that only take an hour a week that would totally transform how your home is. So your child isn't, really looking. For a long time, for Fridays, we had Field Trip Friday. And so it was like my kids knew we were going to get out of the house, and we usually went to a museum, or we did something cool. We always invited friends. They could each bring a friend. Usually it was a homeschooling friend or something else. And then we started getting into hiking every single Friday. And it was like 6 months, and it was in wintertime in Vegas. And we ended up filling up my car with I have 4 boys at the beginning. So it ended up being, I think the group grew to like 30 people, and we went hiking every single Friday morning, and the kids didn't want to come back, and they looked forward to it. And that totally changed our school week, because they weren't asking, when am I going to see people? So it is just little, like, how can you make things more fun? I think fun is like a really big word for me. And how can you get the kids thinking outside the box as well, and not lecture, the lecturing of you need to do this, all this stuff, that's making school no fun. That's making parenting no fun.
Right.
So I think kind of reversing that of saying, I feel like you need to do this, but is there something else we could put on the list? Is there something else you want to learn besides math and English? And what is it?
Yeah. Or how can we do something that will get us to learn math and English without actually doing math and English? Like the best teachers figure out a really creative assignment where it's like they didn't just realize that they learned a bunch of math and English because they were doing all this cool stuff, and so I think that,
I was just going to say, as someone who's not interested in science or math, you shouldn't really be teaching it, because even if you teach it and you study it, you're not going to bring the passion that is going to teach get the kids excited.
So do you do like YouTube and stuff?
Yeah. YouTube. I think I said earlier, YouTube, there's a NASA scientist who does science videos, and he's, he's an astronaut, and he really wants to be teaching high schoolers. So he started doing YouTube videos. Or, most people who are doing really well on YouTube are pretty passionate about what they're talking about.
Yeah.
But, I could teach a 1 hour, 2 hour lesson on science and not do as well as Bill Nye, the science guy.
Exactly. And the resources are so accessible now with YouTube and all these different programs where you could find like the best. So one of the things I'm really excited about is like, could we actually find some of the best teachers in their area, in their subject area, to do like online courses? And like you said, maybe it's 1 or 2 hours a week where they just come in and you put it on the TV with the projector or whatever, and you just have 5 kids in the neighborhood, your little co-quarantine group that watches this, and then maybe there's like a set of assignments that a tutor or a parent can walk them through, and like you just reimagine school right there. Like it's now you have the best science teacher in the world delivering a lesson to all these different kids at the same time. Yeah.
Another option. Okay, you go.
No, I want to talk about the school bus. I want to talk about school bus before.
Okay.
Tell me your next option, and then we're going to close with the school bus.
Okay, so the next option, I was just thinking that if you're really not sure what to do, really no matter what you do, I think you could get together with 4 or 5 families in your community, and you could figure out a day when you and your kids would get together. You could rotate houses, or one of you could host.
Yep.
And I'm definitely thinking about hosting either a morning school or an afternoon school on my property, because I have an acre.
Oh, please
and
do.
I have, but I really, it's hard because I have such a wide range of kids.
Oh yes, you're like the one in school.
But I'm still thinking, I'm going to do an all girls school in the morning, and I'm going to do a boys in the afternoon. Or younger, maybe elementary and then a high school age, so that the kids can kind of, and I'm going to have to charge, and it's going to have to be limited to, 10 kids and people who really want it. But I think we will have a theme pretty much every day, and then probably hire a PE teacher or a high school student who wants to come in and do art or whatever. But I think there are options for other people out there. If you have a home where you could host more than one child, and your child will get more excited about doing that workbook if they're doing alongside with a friend.
Yes, for sure.
And
they need the social aspect, right? Like learning's a social sport.
Yeah. And whether or not the workbook is getting done. I remember my daughter, her handwriting got significantly better when she started writing notes with a best friend. And so I don't know, maybe it's pen paling, maybe it's just a social event, but I would say put a consistent social event on your calendar, like once a week, and get your kids brainstorming what they want to do more. So just try to think outside the box of how you can, whether you're doing an online school or not. I think it's really important for your kids.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. I want to wrap up with the school bus, and then let's just kind of like summarize some of the important pieces of advice that you and I gave. So,
okay.
I want to talk about the school bus, not for too long. I know we talked about it, but because I want people to see that we have a moment and an opportunity to really get out of the paradigm, get out of the box. So your idea about the school bus and having the kids do school through the traveling, all that, I think is like a really good way of saying everything's on the table right now. The table's being turned upside down.
Yeah.
So everything's on the table. Just kidding. So like everything's on the table right now. So what what are some ideas that we can't even fathom because we're so stuck in our little myopic worlds and paradigms of a completely different way for kids to learn. So I love your idea that you tried for a little bit of the school bus. So tell them about it.
Yeah, so I purchased a school bus in 2014 and renovated it. It's only halfway renovated, but the idea came when I did try out on Oprah had a host your own television show. And so I tried out for this and made it pretty far. That was like, anyway, but my idea really stemmed from like trying to show parents that there's everyday learning in your own communities. And so my idea for the television show was to go to like everyday places, maybe in the back room, kind of Mr. Rogers style of like, this is how glass is made. And these are the people that work in the glass factory, but even more so of like taking them to the city dump. This is where our garbage goes. Are we recycling? What's happening to the garbage? So really this education, like world education. So I wanted to do it by traveling around the United States and like hitting up these different cities and saying, these are all places we can go and take our kids. You know, it was less about like traveling and going to national parks and Disneyland and more about going to, you know, so my pitch was through, I went to a funeral home and we took cameras in and showed where the bodies were drained of their blood, where the bodies were stored, how they were cremated. And it was so educational and awesome. And the funeral home directors were amazing and told their stories. And it was just kind of like a community, you know, like get to know your own community, what businesses are going on. And I don't know, you know, about that anymore, but I feel like the traveling part, like really, I could have purchased an RV, but the idea of the school bus and like transforming it into like a homeschooling machine, just like really spoke to me, you know, and I still want to do it. I'm like, I wonder if I can finish renovating it and then rent it out for other people to go, you know, like and it was a cheaper option. You know, we didn't have a ton of money at the time. So I was able to buy the school bus for $4,000 and people renovate these for cheap and their engines go for a long time. So, and it's kind of a cool thing now. I mean, it's way more trendy now. You can search on Instagram about, there's huge like Facebook groups. Back then, I didn't know it was cool. I did it before it was cool. Okay. But anyway, my husband wasn't like a huge fan. And he's like, I do not dream of living on a school bus and traveling around. But, you know, it's kind of one of those things. If I die and I don't do it and I see my kids growing up and I'm just like, that's like what I would regret on my deathbed. Like, dang, I didn't do a full year on a bus.
Yes.
So,
but I think it's so cool because I think it's like this moment we're in around, you know, let's get back to like really connecting with I say get back to because I feel like, you know, everything that's old is new. Like, let's get back to actually connecting with our kids, like prioritizing kids in our world and our society and not the jobs and the money and all the other things that COVID's like hitting us upside the head and saying like, wake up people. But I think it's such a great example. One of the things I want Heart of the Matter to do, which I've told you, is that we find these really unique ideas and we amplify and highlight them. So when you get on the bus, whether it's you or somebody else, and whether you're the person advising them or whether you're on the bus, then we can highlight and video it and maybe make a documentary or whatever, and then we'll put it up on Heart of the Matter, and people can see that there are so many infinite possibilities for how we can do school and educate our kids and learning is not about all these structures and all these schools and factories. It's really about like connecting, letting the kids, you know, figure it out on their own, like all these beautiful things that we agree on. But okay, I want to wrap up, but I was kind of just writing down some of the things we said, like kind of the main points, and then you can add if I missed anything or obviously add to it. So one big one was let go of the fear. So right now we're in fear because we bought into the conditioning around the formula of what we're supposed to do with our kids. And we think if we don't follow that formula, that we're bad parents. And it's actually about us, not about them. Right?
Right.
Is that a big one? Letting go of the
Yeah.
fear? Yeah.
I don't know if anyone can let go of it all the way, because I think that's
Good
part
point.
of,
Good point.
so I
Thank
think
you.
it's moving out of the fear quicker.
Yes.
So it's not staying in the fear for very long.
That's smart.
Recognizing the fear, realizing, yes, this is part of parenting, and then thinking outside the box and saying, is
Yep.
this a legitimate fear, or am I just creating
Yes.
drama where there isn't any?
Thank
Okay,
you.
next point.
No, that was great, because people are gonna be like, I can't let go of the fear. No,
Yeah, just
that's
recognize it,
love
and then try to move on quicker
yes,
than
as
you
quick as
have
possible.
than you did yesterday.
Okay, the other one was that we kept saying is like try and really get outside of the box. So push yourself outside of. So one of the things that I saw in the Heart of the Matter post on the Facebook group was like, these are the two options I have. And whenever I hear like 2 or 3 options, I'm like, okay, we're in dualities and we're in like, this is it. And then I'm always like, being the innovator, I'm always like, oh, let's take those 2 options and make them 22 and mix this and do this and this permutation. So I think we're also saying just like really try and get out of the box, and no idea is too crazy. No idea, it's like the essence is connect with your kids, understand what they need, figure out what they need to learn, and then just draw on all the different resources to try and just be creative and make it happen, and let the fear pass quickly.
Yeah, I think a lot of times as parents, we're like trying to get our kids interested in things. And I think one of the better things would be like, well, what are you interested in? How can you show your kids by example
Nice.
that like my interests are this, and this is how I am learning,
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's not being like way crazy, because I think when you take someone from who's been in school forever, believes in school, wants their kids in school, they can't move to that, they can't live on a school bus, like it's impossible. So it's really just saying, how can I take my current situation and making it a little bit more flexible? How can I take one step, or what can we do this week that doesn't seem so monotonous, and how can I show my kids, I don't know if that makes sense, but
yeah, it makes sense. I think you're saying like kind of figure out where you are as a family, and then where you want to go, and then figure it out. So some people might be
small
like
steps.
Yeah, some people might be like the gap between where we want to be and where we are is so massive that I just want to do a little bit at a time. Or other people might be like, oh, I'm already homeschooling and I just want to go by the bus. And it's just, everybody's different.
Yeah.
Like you said, every kid's different, every family's different. So and obviously they can't buy the bus right now, probably because they can't travel. I don't even know, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Okay, the other one was to work collectively. So to really remember that one of the things I think one of the ways we're lost as a society, especially in the West, is that we forget that we have a community. I know you're really good at it with your community, but a lot of us kind of forget that we just live in our houses, we live in our apartments, and we don't really talk to each other anymore, except for these kind of like social media communities. But so just remember that you have communities, you have people, there's resources, and there's so many ways that you can solve problems like collectively. It's not about you sitting by yourself trying to figure out, how am I going to solve this problem? It's like, no, there's people in the neighborhood, there's grandparents, there's teenagers, there's nonprofits, there's communities, and all of these types, there's all different types of resources if you can just get into those infinite possibilities.
Totally.
Cool.
And yeah, nothing to add on that. Just
okay.
like just even reaching out on Facebook, of saying like, hey, I'm really looking for an art teacher, or my, whatever that is. You can ask around, or even just say, hey, I need a community. Like who are those other people who are also needing in my area? So yeah.
And that's part of the vision of Heart of the Matter, is really connecting people virtually so they could be across the world, and then connecting them in regional places too. So if there are, a group of families that really want to start doing the kind of pod schooling and they need some support, then Heart of the Matter can connect them really quickly. Okay, absolutely. And then the last thing is, and last on mine, if you have any other points before we close, is really focusing on equity. So remembering that some of us have the resources to make a lot of these things happen pretty easily, but we also want to remember that there's, that we're a collective, and there are families, there are people that don't have the resources. So whenever we're thinking of these solutions, remember that there's other groups and people that need support. So for example, I'm hearing about a lot of these pod schools, and I'm like, okay, middle-class family is spending 50 grand, pulling money to pay for a teacher or whatever. Why don't we ask them to give 10 or 20% of everything they pool to a family that can't afford to pay a teacher, or create another pod school so let's just be thinking about how we're in this together, and It's not just about your little community and your little space, but really thinking how you can help everyone, because that's really the purpose of public education, is that every child has a right to high quality education, which is very far from happening. But at least with all these new ideas, we can try and move closer to that, that kind of North Star. Any other like closing points? Or go ahead.
Well, I just think you want to be contributing your best in what you do well at. So even if someone wasn't able to contribute financially, or they weren't able to teach, or they weren't able to rotate, maybe they could make lunch for everyone, you know, or maybe they could maybe they have an uncle who, you know, teaches guitar, and there are resources. So I think just opening up to say, you know, this is what I'm bringing to the table. I'm very good at this, and I would be excited about this. So just opening it up that way. And
that's so good. Instead of being stuck in kind of the capitalistic, like we have to pay somebody and there has to be an exchange of money, like, no, maybe there could just be a community that gets together and says like, oh, my mom's a retired teacher, she'll do it for free, but then send your uncle to teach guitar, and then, you know.
I mean, it's all really about just opening your mind to new possibilities.
Absolutely.
And trying to figure it out. That's it.
That is it. That's where we should end. So say it again, so everyone hears it.
Just opening up your mind to new possibilities. We don't have to be stuck with, and also realizing that this might not be forever. Like it might be this way, but it's going to change. And so we need to constantly be in the flow of like, oh wait, we might be doing this for 6 months, and then maybe something else will come up, and we can, you know, it's just opening yourself up to new people, new ways of learning, new ideas, and including your kids in it. I think having the discussion with your kids of like, what are the possibilities? What could we do with our time? So thinking outside the box.
Yes, thinking outside the box. I knew we'd have a great conversation, and I really appreciate you. And I will say, when you have the capacity, because what I love about Janet is that she has 7 kids, but she's always starting all these other projects. So when you have the capacity, I really do think you need like a YouTube channel or Facebook group or something just to help parents that. Because we talked, and I'm a lifelong educator, and you gave me so many good tips about homeschooling that really helped me when I was in the trenches of trying to homeschool or COVID school, you know, a couple months ago. So anyway, when you're ready, I would like to encourage you.
I just opened up a page for it. So it's Conscious Parenting with Janet Shumway. And I'm not taking any more clients. Just I try to limit my clients so I can parent, but I am doing some free tips on there, and I'm just going to have conversations and answer questions and things like that. So that's where I'm at.
Wonderful. I'm so excited, and thank you so much. So I'll put that in the comments. I'll put Heart of the Matter group in the comments, and then one of us can put in that New York Times article, because we mentioned all those things.
Okay. Sweet.
Thank you for
good luck, everyone.
And we're going to be okay. We're all going to do this together. So thanks, everyone. Okay. Bye, Janet.
Bye.